it's that business journalist's favorite day of the month when the jobs report comes out in the morning and we get to see what's happening in the labor market. And I'll let you tell us a little bit about today's report. What did we find out?
Well, again, the economy continues to move in the right direction, 156,000 jobs. I think the best news in this report is the wage growth, Marilyn. And in 2016, we saw the best wage growth in this recovery. And I tend to put reports like this, given that it's my last month, in perspective. 8 years ago, this economy was hemorrhaging jobs. 800,000 jobs a month lost, roughly 8 years ago. And now we've had 75 months in a row of job growth. That's the longest streak on record. The second longest streak was 48 months. So, I mean, we've blown past that streak. The unemployment rate when the president took office was heading toward 10%. Now we're at 4.7%. This has been a global recession, as you well know, and your listeners know. And we've gained more jobs in the United States than all of the G7 economies combined. And so, I hear these doomsayers talk about that job-killing Affordable Care Act. Well, the unemployment rate was 9.9% when the president signed the Affordable Care Act, and now it's 4.7%. The Affordable Care Act has been anything but a job killer. It's been a lifesaver.
There are about 5.5 million job openings right now, but we have 7.5 million people without work. So, how do you describe that? Why do we have so many job openings and yet still all these people who are not working, and the labor force participation rate is pretty low? So there's some kind of a giant mismatch where there's jobs, wages are rising, and yet we don't have the 7.5 million people moving into those jobs. What's the key problem?
I actually think it's important to put it in a broader perspective. We have an economy, we've got 140 million people or thereabouts who are in the workforce in any given month. So you're always going to have that churn. You have people coming in and out of the workforce. And one sign of a vibrant workforce is the number of openings. In the depths of the Great Recession, we had 2 million openings a month.
Yeah,
now, over the last year or so, the range has been 5.5 to 5.9 thereabouts. That's a good sign. In the depths of the recession, the number of people who voluntarily quit their job slowed to a trickle because they didn't have faith that they could get a better job.
Yeah.
Now you've seen that number go up precipitously because, as you correctly point out, Marilyn, the labor market is indeed tightening, and so people have confidence they can leave that job for a better job. And so when you look at all of the various metrics, the first-time claims for unemployment, again, when this president took office, we were talking about 600,000 roughly per week. Now, first-time claims for unemployment that we reported just over the course of the last day or so, I think it was 235,000, and we have the longest streak of first-time claims under 300,000 since 1970. So when you look at the broad picture of the economy, we were in a deep ditch. We've come a long way, and I absolutely agree with what you said. We still have work to do. We've got to make sure that the wind at our back creates shared prosperity for everyone, because there's still too many people who aren't feeling it.
So I'm sure that each of us could go back to our hometowns and find a heck of a lot of people who would feel pretty bad about the economy, even though in the aggregate, this is really, these are great numbers, but there's still all these mismatches between the job openings and the people getting into them. What is it? Is it mostly a skills gap? Is it a relocation problem? Is it a communication problem that people don't hear and know about what opportunities are there? I mean, what do you see as the single biggest impediment to getting those people that we know into the jobs we know exist?
Well, I think there are a number of things we need to do. I'm a big believer that when you upskill somebody, you give them a better chance to succeed. The education dividend is undeniable. In Buffalo and in Youngstown, when you were growing up and I was growing up, a 10th grade education
could get you a job.
Punch your ticket to the middle class at Bethlehem Steel or Republic Steel. And those jobs, many of them dried up, as you know. And so that steelworker I met in Ohio, who was on the line for literally 28 years, what we did with him, and I remember it vividly, is we used our our tools of training, and we helped that person upskill, so now he's working in advanced manufacturing. And that's what we do at scale at the Department of Labor, and that's been a main component of the president's job creation strategy is upskilling people, because the more skills you have, the better your chances are of punching your ticket to the middle class. And that's why we invest in apprenticeship. You know, apprenticeship is the other college, except without the debt. And there's so many people, some of whom have more than a high school degree and some of whom don't. But the apprenticeship model can work for everybody. And I meet so many people for whom life has already intervened. You can't ask them to take 2 years off to upskill because they got kids. They're taking care of mom or dad or grandma. And that's why the apprenticeship model, it's not only a model that we're using in the skilled trades, it's a model that we're using in IT, in cybersecurity, in healthcare. These are growth industries. And in places like Youngstown and Buffalo and everywhere else, we've seen the largest investment in renewing and restoring apprenticeship in under this president that we've seen in generations.
We were discussing how much things change. I started out in newspapers, and I think when I went into newspapers, I just assumed they'd been around for, 150 years or something, that they would be there throughout my career, and having to learn all the different skills, constantly changing, constantly updating. It's frustrating and annoying, but it does keep me employed. So you've got to continue educating yourself, and I hope that that's something that you feel like you've accomplished.
Absolutely. My father and mother always taught me that the one constant in life is change.
Yeah.
And the challenge and tragedy of my upbringing in Buffalo was that many folks in my parents' generation, when manufacturing went south, literally and figuratively, they didn't get the opportunity to transition to the next phase of the economy. And that's what this president has focused on, making sure that not only do workers have the skills to compete in today's market, but they have the core competencies to thrive tomorrow. And that's what it's all about. That's what upskilling's about. Innovation and change is always going to be America. And we've got to equip workers with those tools to ride that wave, not get overtaken by that wave.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate your joining us, and thank you. And he's basically been with President Obama for the entire second term as the Labor Secretary. So really appreciate your coming with to see
Marilyn,
us
it's been
today.
a pleasure to be with you.
Been a pleasure. Thank you.